A Link to the Past. I'd argue this was the title that truly established the Zelda formula, and for the first time in the game series, we take control of a brand new Link. With an increased budget and development time, Nintendo broke the mold and gave Link an even larger world to roam. So let's uncover the origins of Link in the Super Nintendo era, starting with one of the most beloved titles in the series, A Link to the Past. By the way, this video will have spoilers for A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening. Alright, disclaimer is out of the way. I'm TheMentok and welcome to Origin Oracle. Shoutouts to my editor Alex from the late hours, and don't forget to check out his channel.
Oh yeah.
Now grab a snack, relax, and let's head back in time. We once again return to Hyrule, but this time around we are in the distant past. Yes, we say goodbye to the original Link from the first two games and rewind back to a more prosperous Hyrule. So before we can get to our new hero, let me set the stage a little bit. The game opens by telling the story of an event called the Imprisoning War. Wait, let's not do it that way. Everyone knows you gotta consult the manual for the real— Jesus Christ. Okay, so let's pick this all apart. The manual tells the story of the history of Hyrule, lore of Hyrule's creation, and past events that were passed down as legends within scrolls. For this video, I'm gonna directly reference a translated version of the Japanese manual, as there's quite a few liberties that were taken with the localization. Also, block out everything you know about future games and pretend they're not out yet. So in the beginning, before people existed, there was just chaos. No, not that one. Until mythical gods, or technically goddesses, decided they would go out and create stuff. So there were three gods to be exact: the god of power, the god of wisdom, and the god of courage. And once they finished creating the world, they dipped out for some reason. Maybe they forgot to turn off their galactic stove or something. But they left behind an artifact that serves as a symbol of their power: the Triforce. And though the Triforce itself is just an object, it has the ability to bestow power to those who are worthy, but in the meantime, it's just chilling out in its own little realm. Enter the Hylians, a chosen race of big-eared people who apparently have the ability to hear the voices of the gods, and it's their descendants who would become the people of Hyrule. So many years go by and the legend of the Triforce has been passed down through the people of Hyrule, leading many to seek out its incredible power. But one day, a gang of thieves stumbles upon the gate to the golden land of the Triforce, the home of this extraordinary artifact. And in their greed, the thieves begin to push and fight amongst themselves for the Triforce. But only the leader comes out alive, and in his glory, he makes a wish upon the Triforce. This leader's name was Ganondorf. That sounds like the bad guy from the first game. Interesting side note, only the English localization refers to him as Ganondorf Dragmire, aka Mandrag Ganon. These sound like some corny rapper names, by the way. So the manual goes into the aftermath of the wish, but doesn't explicitly say what the wish was. But with the power of the Triforce, he becomes the evil king, Ganon. With his newly granted status, he wages war against the land of Hyrule. To counteract his evil, the people of Hyrule forge a sword able to resist powers granted by the Triforce, and called it the Master Sword. Unfortunately, only a true hero is able to wield this sword, but Hyrule was fresh out that weekend. So without time to waste, the people of Hyrule are locked in an all-out war with Ganon, with many people losing their lives in the chaos. With no other choice, 7 wise men decided to seal away Ganon in the Golden Land, ending what they would go on to call the Imprisoning War. And after all that, can you believe there's even more story packed in here? Dear God. Okay, so centuries pass and finally we're in present day. Or are we in the past still? Technically we're in the past because this game's a prequel. Hyrule is a thriving kingdom now, and the Imprisoning War is but a memory in most people's minds. Until one day, drought and disease ravage the land. In a desperate move, the king of Hyrule decides he wants to investigate the Golden Land, or rather the imprisoned Dark World as they call it now, presumably to see if it was the source of their troubles. After discovering the seal is still intact, they offer a reward to anyone that can figure out the source of their problems. A totally not evil priest named Aghanim comes from the woodwork and proves himself to the king by quelling the disasters with strange magic. But the people of Hyrule don't care about this. He saved them! He was now their hero, given the position of chief advisor to the king and heir to the 7 wise men. Peace was finally restored.
Psych!
Never mind, Aghanim drives out the king and takes over Hyrule. But finally we see Link, who is awakened telepathically by this time period's Princess Zelda, pleading for his help to save her from the castle dungeon, and this is where the game begins. Whew. Alright, sorry, I need to take a breather here. Alex, let's go to a commercial. Okay, so we'll check back on Link in a minute, but let's first see how this game came to be. A Link to the Past began its development all the way back in 1988, shortly after the release of Zelda 2, but Nintendo decided it was best to bring this ambitious project to their next console, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. A Link to the Past would be one of the very first 8 megabit cartridges, giving the team a bit more memory to work with to make the world even more expansive. Not only that, they returned to the top-down perspective of the original game and expanded on that formula, adding more dungeons to explore, more hidden areas to find, more puzzles to solve, and plenty of treasure to keep the player busy. In this title, not only does Link get to explore Hyrule, but an alternate world known as the Dark World as well, opening up the game to a whopping 13 dungeons. Returning to direct this game was Takashi Tezuka, with Shigeru Miyamoto as producer, Kensuke Tanabe as the scriptwriter, and of course Koji Kondo composing the soundtrack. Many of the famous musical themes you hear throughout the series originated from this game as well, like Ganon's theme, Hyrule Castle, Zelda's Lullaby, and Kakariko Village, to name a few. By the way, this would be the debut game for a young Yoshiaki Koizumi, director of Super Mario Galaxy, and the one responsible for that super touching backstory for Rosalina that was snuck into the game. He said in a Wired interview that his first assignment was to do the art and layout, and eventually the writing for the manual for A Link to the Past. What was funny was at that time, it didn't seem like they'd really figured out what most of the game elements meant. So it was up to me to come up with the story and things while I was working on the manual. So for example, the design of the goddesses, as well as the star sign associated with them. Koizumi would actually go on to write the story for Link's Awakening, but more on that later. The game released in Japan in November 1991 under the name The Legend of Zelda: Triforce of the Gods. And as usual in the 90s, the localization team decided to remove all religious references from the game, shifting the title to A Link to the Past. Alright, so back to our story. The game begins with Link awakening in his home with his uncle, who decides to leave the house equipped with sword and shield, and he also warns Link to stay behind. We now take control of Link, who does the opposite, sneaking his way into the castle in the middle of the stormy night through a secret passage, led by a Zelda speaking into his head. It's in this passage Link finds his wounded uncle, who gives him his sword and shield. His last request? Save Zelda. I just realized how much this guy actually looks like Morshu. Should I cover the CDI games next?
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
Anyway, we managed to save Zelda from the dungeon and take her to the sanctuary outside the castle, where we meet the loyal sage. This guy tells us that Aghanim is being puppeteered by a dark force that can only be vanquished by the Master Sword. So, Link must go on a journey to find this Master Sword, but first needs to collect 3 pendants across Hyrule that will give him access to the sword. After obtaining the Pendant of Courage, Pendant of Power, and Pendant of Wisdom, Link heads into the Lost Woods to finally retrieve the Master Sword that will vanquish Aghanim once and for all. But just as Link obtains the Master Sword, Zelda is screaming for help inside his brain. He races back to the sanctuary to see Zelda gone, and the loyal sage dies.
You can't keep getting away with it!
I mean, what did you expect? You were like right next to the castle with this evil priest. Anyway, Link confronts Aghanim, who uses Zelda to break the seal of the 7 sages, putting Hyrule at risk for Ganon's wrath once again. In one last battle, Link manages to kill Aghanim using the Master Sword, but as this nuisance finally dies, he throws Link into the Dark World, kicking off the surprise part 2 of this game. Yes, now Link must journey across this alternate world, tracking down 7 kidnapped maidens, who all turn out to be the descendants of the 7 sages from centuries ago. And as you do so, this is how you find out the true origins of this version of Link. Of course, he's a legendary hero, but is also a descendant of the great knights of Hyrule who originally waged war against Ganon during the Imprisonment War. With all the maidens saved, Link heads to Ganon's tower to fight the final battle, only to find Aghanim waiting for him. Ugh. Link, get rid of this dude. So now he's dead for real. Uh-oh, plot twist. Aghanim was simply the alter ego of Ganon this whole time. I'm sure at this point of the game, Link couldn't give 2 shits. So with the Master Sword and Silver Arrows, nice callback to the first game, he finally kills Ganon and retrieves the Triforce in the process, wishing everything to go back to normal in Hyrule. This revives his uncle, the loyal sage, and the King of Hyrule, who is presumed dead, and the game ends with Link returning the Master Sword to its pedestal. Now I know based off of my other videos, this was kind of a long-winded dive into this game, but I wanted to cover a lot of these details since many of these plot points will be referenced in later games. And I also just love this game, so I needed to do it justice. But just like the previous titles, A Link to the Past topped the sales charts, becoming the best-selling game in 1991 in Japan. In early 1992, the game was also successful in the United States, becoming the third best-selling game of 1992, with 1 million units sold. If you're curious, the bestsellers that year were Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Street Fighter 2. The Sonic fan in me was internally cheering at this fact. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten where this all started. My Sonic fans, show yourself in the comments. Anyway, the Legend of Zelda series continued to cement itself as a hit, but we wouldn't see another mainline title for another 7 years. So what happened to the Zelda series during this gap? There has to be something else, right? Link's Awakening, yay! I might be wearing a different shirt than before, but don't mind that, I just changed while I was talking. Link's Awakening for the Game Boy was released in 1993. Well, this would be the title that's my first Zelda game. Well, the Game Boy Color re-release anyway. But the point is, I might have a heavy bias toward this one. The game stars the same Link that was introduced in A Link to the Past, and while the story is mostly its own thing, this has been placed in the timeline as a sequel to A Link to the Past, from the Hyrule Historia book released for the 25th Zelda anniversary. Later down the line, Nintendo would release 2 Game Boy Color games, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, which would precede Link's Awakening in the timeline according to this Historia book, but we'll get to those titles in another video. The game begins with a short cutscene of Link sailing the seas, his ship stuck in a massive storm that leaves him shipwrecked. He washes ashore on a mysterious island, and we see a young girl approach him as the camera pans up to a massive egg resting on top of a mountain. Cue the title screen and the hype Legends of Zelda theme. By the way, if you didn't put headphones into your Game Boy, you weren't playing these games right, man. A whole new level of experience with that shit. Anyway, I think this short intro does a great job communicating what we need to know about the story, but I decided to take a look at the manual for that sweet extra lore. Though you fulfilled the Hyrulean prophecy of the legendary hero and destroyed the evil tyrant Ganon, the land of Hyrule enjoyed only a precarious peace. Who knows what threats may arrive from Ganon's ashes? The restless people murmured as they knitted their brows and shook their heads. Ever vigilant, you decided to journey away from Hyrule and its toxicity on a quest for enlightenment, in search of wisdom that would make you better able to withstand the next threat to your homeland. Imagine how confused I was with this being my first Zelda game. Hyrule? Ganon? Where's Zelda? Is she in this game? She's not, by the way. Why is this called Legend of Zelda if she's not in the game? Anyway, all of this is a direct reference to the aftermath of A Link to the Past. Everything I say from this point on will be spoilers for Link's Awakening, just a heads up, because I know some of you still haven't played the remake as of yet. So here goes. So the game begins with Link waking up in the house of Marin in Mabe Village. And I know people are going to be sticklers about pronunciation. You guys are ruthless in the comments. I'm going to pronounce it Marin and Mabe. And whoever has an issue with that, go ahead and leave it in the comments below, bruv. Give me that engagement, all right? Anyway, this is the girl who saved him from the beach. And she tells him that he washed up on Koholint Island. And her father, Mario, Tarin, gives Link his shield back. You're now free to roam Koholint Island, and the first order of business is to find your sword. So Link heads back to the beach and finds his sword on the shores, only to be approached by a talking owl that tells him about the giant egg that we saw on the title screen. We learn that inside this egg, a being known as the Windfish is asleep, and the owl tasks Link in awakening the Windfish, otherwise he will never be able to leave Koholint Island. So with that said, Link goes on a journey to find 8 magical instruments that will allow him to awaken the Windfish with a song that we'll later find out is called Ballad of the Windfish. Alright Link, you have your work cut out for you again, so let's talk about the development of Link's Awakening while you risk your life. This game was a bit of an experiment, as one of the programmers at Nintendo, Kazuyaki Morita, started messing around with the early Game Boy development kits. He was developing a Zelda-like game, and over time, other Nintendo developers from the Nintendo R&D 4 team started to join him in his efforts. In an Iwata-asked segment that discusses the history of Zelda handheld games, Takashi Tezuka mentions how he joined Morita in the project. We weren't particularly planning to make a Zelda game for the Game Boy, but we thought we'd try it out to see how it would work. So at first there was no official project. We'd do our regular work during normal hours and then work on it sort of like an after-school club activity. And if you've played this game, it kinda shows, as there's so many references to other Nintendo titles like Mario and Kirby. For instance, we see a cameo from Wart from Super Mario Bros. 2, or this Yoshi doll that is a prize for the crane game in the village. Not to mention this Kirby enemy running around one of the dungeons. Its official name is literally Anti-Kirby. So seeing this was a side project, the team had a lot of fun with this, to the point where Tezuka felt as if they were making, quote, a parody of The Legend of Zelda. Yoshiaki Koizumi, who was in charge of the instructions manual for A Link to the Past, would return to write the main story for Link's Awakening. The team's major inspiration for the plot came from the thriller television series Twin Peaks, attempting to put Link in an environment that felt mysterious and supernatural. Link's interactions with the villagers were written to feel suspicious as a mystery looms over Koholint Island. Tezuka has said that, at the time, Twin Peaks was rather popular. The drama was all about a small number of characters in a small town. So when it came to Link's Awakening, I wanted to make something that, while it would be small enough in scope to easily understand, it would have deep and distinctive characteristics. The gameplay draws heavily from the formula established within A Link to the Past, continuing to utilize the top-down view and has Link going from dungeon to dungeon collecting the instruments required to complete the game. Of course, the map is littered with hidden passages, heart containers, and 2 major villages where you can interact with the islanders. In the same Iwata Asks interview, Eiji Aonuma, currently the main producer for the Legend of Zelda franchise, has said that the staff who worked on Ocarina of Time had all played Link's Awakening, so they had a sense of how far they could go with the Zelda series. If we had proceeded from A Link to the Past straight to Ocarina of Time without Link's Awakening in between, Ocarina would have been different. So there you have it. The folks in Nintendo themselves seem to have a soft spot for this game as well, seeing as they made an enhanced version called Link's Awakening DS for the Game Boy Color in '98 and a full remake for the Nintendo Switch in 2019. I'd say if you can get your hands on either of these, go ahead and play them, as I think the Game Boy Color version has aged very well. But if you want the full remake experience, they did this game justice in the Switch version as well. So we head back to Link, who now has 5 out of 8 instruments. This weird, mysterious owl character tells him to go to a place called the Southern Face Shrine, where Link will discover the crushing truth of Koholint Island. The island and all its inhabitants are simply a dream of that entity known as the Windfish. All the friends you've made will simply disappear once the Windfish is awakened. But Link needs to go home, so f them villagers. This serves as the major twist of the game, and to make matters worse, the villagers have no idea that they're just a dream. This brings me to Link's interactions with Martin throughout the game. Though rather simple for a Game Boy game, you can tell there's this deepening friendship here, or even something more. Shortly before Link learns the truth of the island, Martin shares with him her wish to become a seagull so she can fly anywhere and sing her songs to the many people of the world. And in their final interaction, Martin wants to tell Link something, but Mario pulls up and cockblocks the situation. Way to go, Mario. But with all this in mind, Link presses on and collects the rest of the instruments, bringing them all to the top of Mount Tamaranch, where he plays the Ballad of the Windfish. The egg cracks open, and Link hops inside, finding out that all the monsters and craziness on the island were caused by an entity called the Shadow Nightmares. So in an extended final boss battle, Link must vanquish this shadow that takes on the forms of enemies he's encountered in the past. Even Aghanim and Ganon make a cameo. Growing up, I never really considered that this entity might just be a nightmare that is also a product of the Windfish's dream. I always considered it as some evil entity that hijacked the Windfish's dream at some point while it was asleep. But I guess this isn't really fully explained, but leave your theories in the comments. Once defeated, Link meets the Windfish, who tells him that the nightmares stopped him from awakening. But it's time now to say goodbye. The Windfish awakens and the island disappears, leaving Link stranded in the ocean on a wooden board from his shipwreck. In one last cutscene, Link looks to the sky to see the Windfish flying above, and the game ends. But if you somehow got through the game without dying, there is one last scene after the credits where we see an image of Martin singing in the sky, fading away to reveal a seagull. How romantic. And that's great and all, but I'm more concerned about Link. Though it's debated whether this game comes before or after Oracle of Seasons and Ages in the timeline, if we go with what the Hyrule Historia book says, this would be the last time we see this version of Link, leading me to believe he died of thirst and starvation at sea.
Help me, I need water.
Don't think too hard about that theory, but he's literally stuck in the middle of nowhere on one tiny little plank. Funny enough, in the remake, they put a barrel beside him at the end, which I assume has water in it to mostly address my concerns. For all my other Link's Awakening fans that want to see another interpretation of this story, there was a manga written by Ataru Kajiva, published in 1994 based on the events of this game. While I won't go into crazy details, this manga adapts the plot pretty well, and we get to see the emotional journey Link goes through during his adventure on Koholint, The story spends more time covering the relationship between Martin and Link, but also adds new characters as well, like Felicia, a fairy that the owl sends to serve as Link's guide. But the real reason I'm bringing this manga up is because I like its interpretation of how Link handles the news of the island being a dream of the Windfish. He gets really pissed off with the owl and Felicia for hiding the truth from him, and actually chooses not to move forward in waking the Windfish. It takes the time to show that he's emotionally distraught and depicts Link heading back to the village to try to take Marin away from the island on his own. Link desperately sails out on a boat with her, but an invisible barrier in the sea blocks their escape. But in the end, Link realizes he has no choice and comes to terms with the fact that he has to wake the Windfish. As a side note, the manga also addresses what the nightmares actually are. The Windfish mentions at the end of the story that it was created due to the weakness in his own heart. This Windfish certainly caused a lot of problems for Link. But if you want a deeper dive into this story, go ahead and check out the entire manga. I think it's pretty awesome. Once again, this game is absolutely worth your time, no matter which version you decide to play, and anytime I jump back into this game, it has me pining for another 2D Zelda game. So now that Tears of the Kingdom is out, hopefully Nintendo has their eyes set on an Oracle of Seasons and Ages remake, or maybe a brand new 2D Zelda game altogether.
Welcome, hero. The people of this land have all been awaiting your arrival.
After Link's Awakening, there would be somewhat of a gap in Zelda releases. At least, that would be the case for the Western market. In Japan, Nintendo was driving peripheral hardware for the Super Famicom known as the Satellaview that hit the market in April of 1995. This unique device was created in a collaboration between Nintendo and St. Giga, a satellite radio company in Japan, and it allowed players to use St. Giga's satellite subscription service to receive broadcasts through the device to download all sorts of content like games, magazines, and music. If you watched my videos before, I talked a little bit about this device in regards to a game called BS Super Mario USA, which brought Mario and his friends back to the world of Subcon for another adventure, with audio of the story being broadcast to the player while they played through the game. Well, the Legend of Zelda series would also get a couple of titles for the Satellaview, with the first being BS The Legend of Zelda, released in August of 1995. The BS stands for Broadcast Satellite, by the way. This game was somewhat of a remake of the original Legend of Zelda, but there are quite a few differences that make this game stand out on its own. First off, since it was a Satellaview title, players were drip-fed new content on a weekly basis for 8 weeks, with this game being split up into 2 major maps. And since it was being broadcasted directly to the player, they would only have 1 hour every week to tune in and play the game. So basically, it was just like catching a TV show airing at a certain time. But considering you needed a subscription to the St. Giga station, you could say this is a very early form of live service games that we see today. Not surprised Nintendo pioneered that effort. Another interesting part about this game is that it doesn't necessarily star Link, and the player had the opportunity to select their own avatar with male and female avatars available. But the plot itself is relatively the same, with the player going on a journey to collect the fragments of the Triforce of Wisdom and defeat Ganon once again. And though the overworld is a little bit smaller, it's kinda nice seeing a revamped version of the original Zelda. This remake also implemented a time system, so depending on the time within the hour, different events would occur on the map. For example, the player would be granted infinite bombs 45 minutes in. The player would also hear new dialogue from the old man from the cave, communicating with them as they traverse the map.
A fearsome vision has appeared to my eyes now. A figure that strides on, enveloped in smoke.
If the player managed to collect the pieces of the Triforce, they could then head back to access the door to Ganon's chamber and attempt to complete the game. All of this within 1 hour. This feels more like a time attack than anything else. So Nintendo would take this formula and make a successor to this remake in 1997 with a title called BS The Legend of Zelda: Ancient Stone Tablets. Content-wise, this game has a lot more to offer and is broken up into 4 episodes that were released weekly as well. Once again, this title stars the player's avatar, this time known as the Hero of Light, and this served as somewhat of a sequel to A Link to the Past, with an original storyline set in Hyrule 6 years after Ganon's defeat. The first episode begins with the player's avatar stumbling into Hyrule from the Satellaview's event plaza, where they discover the kingdom during a time of peace. At the title screen, the player would have audio broadcasted to them, setting the stage for the story, much like a radio play. And unfortunately, it seems like the original Japanese broadcast has been lost to time. But humans never fail to impress me. A dedicated team of fans managed to not only get the Ancient Stone Tablets episodes working via emulation, they've modified versions that allow all of this to work on a real console. In addition to that, in lieu of the missing voice acting and audio broadcast, the team recreated the entire soundtrack, translated the Japanese scripts, and recorded an English dub to overlay on top of the game. So thanks to this team, we can now get very close to the original experience intended for this game. And I'll also link their website in the description below. So the title opens with Zelda and Agana, the younger brother of Saraswala, the wise man from A Link to the Past, who I've never mentioned in this video before, witnessing a bright light in the sky as the hero of light appears in Hyrule.
It's almost as though something fell from the sky.
I saw a strange beacon of light shining from here. There is no time to worry about such things. Come, this youth could be injured. Hurry and help me, please.
They discover the Avatar on the ground and bring him back to their hideout to get some rest. And while the Avatar sleeps, Zelda and Agana discuss sensing a looming danger in Hyrule. I'm guessing Link is either stuck in the dream of the Windfish at this point, or dead at sea. This game isn't exactly proving my theory wrong. But Zelda senses that this new child who arrived in Hyrule is endowed with courage, hinting that they may be a hero of light. Monsters begin attacking Hyrule again, and the gameplay of the episode begins with our hero awakening. Agana explains that they're a person of great importance, gives them a bag with some items, and sends them on their way to find a weapon to defend themselves within the Eastern Palace. The player can now explore the palace using a golden bee within their backpack to defeat enemies until they acquire their first sword. Much like BS Legend of Zelda, these episodes last an hour, and the player can explore very specific regions within Hyrule until time expires. The map is pulled directly from A Link to the Past, but there are quite a few changes to make the gameplay unique. The dungeons are set up differently, and once again at certain times within the broadcast, different events will occur. Like in episode 1 at 45 minutes, the player can play a pot smashing minigame to gather some extra rupees. Our time limit aside, I really would have enjoyed this as a kid. So the Hero of Light goes around collecting these stone tablets, much like any other mystical item within a Zelda game. There's a lot of back and forth between episodes as everyone's trying to figure out ways to decipher the text on these tablets. But once they're collected, Zelda, Agana, and our hero proceed to decipher the text using the Book of Mudora that Link possessed during the events of A Link to the Past. So the initial set of tablets tell our heroes where silver arrows are buried on Death Mountain, so I'm sure it's no secret where this is all going. So the hero ventures to retrieve the Master Sword where Link left it, and alongside Zelda climbs Death Mountain to uncover those silver arrows. And we learn that even though his body was destroyed by Link, Ganon's anger and malice lives on. So it's up to the Hero of Light to clean up the mess. It was this malice that drew the Hero of Light to Hyrule in the first place, which has me believe that this version of Link really is dead. Anyway, the hero heads into the Dark World once more to destroy Ganon once and for all, and after traversing an updated version of Ganon's tower, our hero uses the silver arrows to put down Ganon, restoring peace to Hyrule once more. I find it funny that if you beat Ganon before the hour is up, all you can do is just kind of stand around and wait for the next part of the broadcast. The game ends with the Hero of Light returning the Master Sword to its rightful place, and being sent back to their own world, with Zelda saying her goodbyes.
Goodbye!
While nothing too extravagant, these Satellaview titles brought in some much needed Zelda content between the release of Link's Awakening and Ocarina of Time. They were deemed a success for St. Giga, but Nintendo didn't see it that way, and the Satella project was a commercial failure. Either way, this does remain as an important part of Zelda's history, as the franchise has always been utilized to push new tech for Nintendo. I'm still calling this the origin of Link despite the last two games. But next we'll be taking a look at what some people would say is the most iconic time for the Zelda series, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. But I'll probably just use that video to gush over Oracle of Seasons. Anyway, be sure to check that description below to support me on social media, Alex's channel, and the many sources involved in putting this video together. Until next time everyone, be safe. The Prophet has spoken.